Now, besides variables and constants, another crucial JavaScript concept are functions, which can either be created with help of the function keyword or with help of this arrow function syntax, to which I'll get back in a couple of seconds. Let's start with the function keyword. The idea behind functions, no matter how you're creating them, simply is that you're defining some code that's not executed immediately, but instead at some point in the future when you call the function, and that can be executed as often as you want because a function can be called multiple times. Now, to show you what I mean, let me finish this function. And this is how you write a basic function. You give it a name, which comes after the function keyword. Then you have a so-called parameter list, to which I'll get back in a second. You do create it with the opening and closing parentheses, and you need these parentheses here. And then you have opening and closing curly braces, and between those curly braces, you put your function code. So the code that's not executed right now, but at some point in the future. So for example here, I could put a console log statement into this greet function, and if I would save this and reload this page, you would see nothing in the console. The reason for that is that this function is defined but never executed. Because as mentioned, with a function you're defining code that's not executed immediately, but at some point in the future when you call the function, when you invoke the function. And you do that by using the name of the function like this, and then adding another pair of parentheses after that name, but without the function keyword in front of it. With the function keyword in front of it, you're defining it. Like this, you're calling it. And now when this code is encountered in your code file, the code in the function will be executed. So now with this added, if I save this and if I reload this page, now I do see hello here, because now we're calling the function. And as mentioned, I can call the function as often as I want. You can literally add as many function invocations here as needed. And if you save that, you'll therefore see hello being output 5 times. Because I have 5 function invocations here. That's how you define and call a function. And this is a super important concept which we'll use all the time throughout this course. Also, especially in React, it turns out that we'll define a crucial React building block as a function. But you'll learn more about this later once we dive into React. Now, functions cannot just be defined and executed like this. Instead, they also take so-called parameters, input values. For example, username and message. You can add as many parameters as you want, you simply separate them with a comma. These parameters are then available inside of the function, and only there. So here I could then output username, with a capital N, and then thereafter also message. I can do this because I'm accepting these 2 parameters. And since it's your function, these parameter names are up to you, but they have to follow the same rules as these variable names did. The same, by the way, is also true for the function name. This should also be defined just as you learned it for the variable names. For example, if it's a word that consists of multiple words, you would also use this camel case notation here. So now this function takes 2 input parameters, therefore when you're calling this function, you also should provide values for these input parameters. Because in the end, the idea behind using parameters simply is that you can have one reusable function that can be reused with different input values. For example, here I could call it with max and hello the first time, and then call it again where I greet manual and say hello. What's up? Like this. Now I'm using the same function with different input values. That's possible thanks to parameters. And therefore, if I reload this, I see max and hello. And then I see manual and hello, what's up? Now, what's also worth noting here is that you can also assign default values to parameters by adding an equal sign here. For example, hello. This would allow me to call this function without providing a value for the second parameter, and if I don't provide one, the default value will be used. But I can, of course, also overwrite that default value by simply providing a value for that parameter here. With that, if we reload this, I get max and hello, thanks to this default here. And then I get manual and hello what's up, where I do use this value for overriding the default. Now functions cannot just take input values, but they can also return values by using the return keyword. So for example, in this function, instead of console logging username and message, I could return a string that combines both. I could return a string here where I say, hi, I am, a white space here, and then I add the username, and then another white space or dot maybe, and then the message. So now with that, I'm using this function here to in the end construct a string based on these input values. And we could also use return if we would not accept any parameters. In this case, I'm using the parameters for deriving the returned value, but if you have a function that doesn't need any input in order to work correctly, you of course also don't have to accept one. Parameters and the return keyword work totally independent from each other, but as in this example, they can also work together. So with that, this function here no longer greets a user, but instead creates a greeting. And therefore, we also might want to rename it. Because whenever you name things, functions, variables, whatever, you should describe what's stored inside of it in case of a variable or constant, or what it does in case of a function. So here, since it no longer greets a user, but instead creates a greeting string, we might want to rename it to create greeting. And then when we call it down there, we of course also no longer get any output in the console. Instead, now we should store the result in a constant or variable, because this function now returns a value which we can use. We could use it as an input for console log, for example. And therefore, in that case, we would see, hi, I'm Max, hello. Maybe we should add a white space after the dot here to improve the formatting. But since this here is not great from a readability perspective, we instead might want to store it in a constant or variable like this, and then use that constant or variable so that the overall code is more structured. So with that here, we could get our two greetings, and then of course also console log these two greetings. And therefore we would see those greetings again. So functions can also be used for producing and returning values. And they should be named such that it's very clear what a function does. Though in the end, of course, just as with the variable names, the function names are up to you.